It was supposed to be just business, until he pulled her close and whispered what he wanted. It was supposed to last 6 weeks. That was the lie she told herself as she stepped into the glass elevator and watched the city drop away beneath her feet. 6 weeks of keeping her head down, doing the job, taking the money, and leaving before anything complicated could happen. No attachments, no expectations, no mistakes, business only. Iris Monroe had built her life on that rule. The elevator doors opened onto the top floor and the lie began to crack. The office was silent in the way only expensive spaces ever were. No clutter, no warmth. Just clean lines, muted colors, and the quiet authority of someone who didn't need to prove power because he already owned it. "Ms. Monroe," the assistant asked, barely looking up. "He's ready." Iris adjusted the strap of her bag and nodded once. Calm, controlled, professional. She had faced worse rooms than this. The door opened. Ethan Cross stood by the window, hands in his pockets, city spread beneath him like a private possession. He didn't turn around when she entered. "Sit," he said, not unkind, not abrupt, just final. She sat. Only then did he turn, tall, impeccably dressed, face carved into something unreadable by years of discipline. His eyes landed on her with the precision of someone used to assessing risk. "You're not what I expected," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "Neither are you," a beat passed. Something flickered in his gaze, interest, irritation, she couldn't tell. "Good," he said. "I don't like predictable people." He moved to the desk and picked up a folder, sliding it toward her. "You've read the offer." "Yes, and you understand why you're here." "To clean up a problem no one else can touch," she replied evenly. His mouth curved slightly. "Accurate. The problem was public, high-profile, dangerous. A deal gone wrong, a reputation on the edge, investors circling like sharks. Ethan Cross didn't need an assistant, he needed someone invisible. "You'll have full access," he continued. "Files, meetings, negotiations, you'll operate under my authority, and when this is over, you leave," he said simply. Good, that was exactly what she wanted to hear. "There are conditions," he added. She didn't flinch. "There always are." "No personal involvement," he said. "No emotional entanglement, no assumptions." She nodded. "I'm not interested in any of that." His gaze lingered a second longer than necessary. "And no physical contact unless unavoidable." That caught her attention. "Unavoidable," she repeated. "Crowds, security, optics," he said coolly. "Nothing else? Fine." Silence settled. He studied her like he was trying to find the crack. "Why did you take this job?" he asked. She met his gaze without hesitation. "Because you're offering double my usual rate and because you need someone who won't blink." A pause, then quietly, "Fair." By the end of the first day, Iris understood two things. First, Ethan Cross didn't raise his voice, ever. He commanded rooms with silence, not volume. Second, he noticed everything. He noticed when she corrected a projection no one else questioned. When she flagged a clause his legal team had missed. When she refused to be intimidated by people twice her age with 10 times her power. He didn't praise her, he adjusted strategy around her. That was worse. The late night was unavoidable. Crisis didn't respect office hours. By 11, the building was empty except for the two of them. Iris sat at the long conference table, documents spread out, jaw tight with focus. Ethan stood at the whiteboard, sleeves rolled up, tie gone. "You're assuming they'll back down," she said. "They will." "They won't," she countered. "They're not after compromise, they want leverage." He turned slowly. "And you're sure?" "Yes." A long moment passed, then he erased the board and rewrote the plan. No argument, no ego, just trust. That unsettled her more than resistance would have. The elevator stalled on the way down, not dramatically, no alarms, just a sudden stop that jolted her forward. Iris stumbled. Ethan caught her instinctively, one hand at her waist, the other steadying her shoulder. The contact was brief, but electric. She froze, so did he. The world narrowed to breath and awareness and the fact that his grip hadn't loosened yet. He stepped back immediately. "Apologies," he said. "Reflex." "It's fine," she replied too quickly. The elevator restarted seconds later. They didn't speak the rest of the ride. The next morning, the rumors started. People whispered about her access, about her influence, About how closely Ethan Cross watched her during meetings. Iris ignored it, she always did, until the confrontation came from outside. A rival executive leaned too close during a negotiation, voice laced with condescension. "You're bold, stepping into a role you haven't earned." Iris opened her mouth. Ethan moved first. He stepped beside her and placed a hand at her back, subtle but firm, pulling her just close enough to make a statement. "She speaks for me," he said calmly. "And she's earned more than you have." The room went quiet. Iris's pulse roared in her ears. This wasn't unavoidable contact, this was deliberate. Afterward, in the hallway, she confronted him. "That wasn't necessary." "Yes, it was. You're blurring lines." His gaze sharpened. "I'm correcting disrespect." "You don't need to protect me." "I know," he said quietly. Then, after a pause, "I wanted to." The words landed harder than any touch. That night, as they stood alone in the empty office again, the tension finally snapped. Someone raised their voice in a call. A deal teetered on the edge. Iris stepped in, calm and unflinching, and shut it down. When it ended, the silence between them was charged. Ethan closed the door, not locking it, not trapping her, just closing it. He stepped closer, not touching, but close enough that she felt his presence like heat. "This was supposed to be business," she said quietly. "I know," he replied. "And yet," he leaned in, voice low, meant only for her. "And yet," he whispered, "I want you to stay." Her breath caught, because that was not business, and the most dangerous part wasn't that he'd said it. It was that, for the first time since she'd walked into his world, Iris Monroe didn't immediately want to leave. Iris didn't answer him. She couldn't, not with the echo of his words still hanging between them, not with the office suddenly feeling too small, too quiet, too aware. "I'll finish the report," she said instead, voice steady in a way she didn't feel. Ethan straightened immediately. Distance snapped back into place like armor sliding on. "Send it before morning," he said, professional, neutral, controlled. She nodded, gathered her things, and walked out without looking back, but his whisper followed her all the way home. The next week was worse, not because anything happened, because nothing did. Ethan became precise to the point of cruelty. Meetings started exactly on time. Conversations were clipped. Emails were brief, stripped of anything that wasn't strictly necessary. He didn't stand close anymore, didn't touch her not even when optics allowed it, didn't look at her longer than required. And yet, he rearranged schedules so she wasn't cornered by hostile executives. He shut down rumors before they reached her desk. He canceled a trip when he noticed the tremor in her hands after a 14-hour day. Care without closeness, attention without admission. It left Iris off balance. The work intensified. Long nights, tight deadlines, a hostile takeover attempt that required constant vigilance. Iris found herself spending more time in Ethan's orbit than anywhere else. Shared cars, private elevators, late-night strategy sessions that stretched until the city lights blurred. They worked well together, too well. He anticipated her arguments before she made them. She filled in the gaps of his thinking without explanation. It was seamless, efficient, dangerous. One night, close to midnight, Iris leaned back in her chair and rubbed her temples. "You're exhausted," Ethan said quietly. "I'm fine. You haven't eaten. I will later." He disappeared without another word. 5 minutes later, a plate appeared beside her laptop. She stared at it. "You didn't have to." "I know," he said, that word again. She looked up at him. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you won't stop," he replied. "And I need you sharp." "That's not the real reason." Silence, then carefully, "No, the business trip was unavoidable. 2 cities, 3 days, 1 hotel." Iris read the itinerary twice, hoping she'd misinterpreted it. She hadn't. On the plane, Ethan sat beside her, posture relaxed, eyes on his tablet. He didn't speak unless necessary. She hated that she noticed the absence. At the hotel, he handed her a keycard. "Separate rooms," he said, "different floors." Relief hit first, then disappointment. She didn't question it. The conference was brutal. Negotiations turned hostile. A rival firm made it clear they intended to undermine Iris's role publicly. During one session, a senior executive leaned back and smiled thinly. "You're impressive," he said, "but temporary consultants rarely last." Before Iris could respond, Ethan spoke. She's not temporary, he said evenly. The room stilled. The man raised an eyebrow. Is that so? Yes, Ethan replied, and if you question her authority again, this conversation ends. Iris felt every eye in the room shift to her. Afterward in the hallway, she rounded on him. You keep doing that? Doing what? Claiming me, she said sharply, in ways that aren't professional. He stopped walking. I'm setting boundaries, he said. For them, she snapped. Or for yourself, his jaw tightened. For you, I didn't ask for that. No, he said quietly, you didn't. They stood there, tension coiled tight, then he stepped back. This doesn't change anything, he added. She laughed softly. You keep saying that, because it has to be true. That night, the hotel lost power. Not completely, just enough to plunge the hallway into dim emergency lighting. Iris stepped out of her room, phone pressed to her ear. No signal, she muttered. Neither here, Ethan said behind her. She startled. He held up his phone. Network S down, temporary. Thunder rolled outside, she exhaled sharply. Of course, they stood there awkward, the corridor empty and echoing. You can wait in my room, he said finally, until it stabilizes. She hesitated. That's not a good idea. No, he agreed, but it's practical. She followed him in. The room was dark, lit only by city glow and the occasional flash of lightning. They stood on opposite sides of the space, distance carefully maintained. This is temporary, she said. I know. The power didn't come back quickly. Minutes stretched, then longer. The storm grew louder. Iris's shoulders tightened despite her efforts to stay calm. Ethan noticed. You don't like storms, he said quietly. I'm fine. You're gripping the chair, he observed. She released it immediately. Habit. He moved not toward her but to the window, drawing the curtains partway closed. The room softened. Better? He asked. She nodded. Thank you. Silence filled the space, charged, heavy. I shouldn't have said that, he said suddenly. She looked up. Said what? That I wanted you to stay, he clarified. It crossed a line. Yes, she agreed, and it won't happen again. Her chest tightened unexpectedly. Good, she said. He met her gaze. Is it? She didn't answer because the truth was every part of her had been waiting to hear it again. The power flickered back on, the spell broke. I should go, Iris said quickly. Yes, Ethan replied. At the door, she paused. This is still just business, she said, needing to hear it aloud. Ethan nodded. Of course. She stepped into the hallway, but as the door closed behind her, one truth settled in her bones. Business didn't make her heart race. Business didn't make silence feel dangerous. Business didn't leave her wondering what might happen if one of them stopped pretending. And somewhere between the stalled elevator and the stormlit hotel room, Iris Monroe realized proximity wasn't the risk. Denial was. The ballroom was too bright, too loud. Too full of people who believed power belonged to whoever spoke last. Iris felt it the moment she stepped inside, eyes tracking her movement, curiosity sharpened by weeks of quiet speculation. She adjusted the fall of her jacket, spine straight, expression neutral. This was work, just work. Ethan walked beside her, close enough to signal unity, distant enough to preserve the lie they were still telling themselves. Stay near me, he said quietly. I can handle myself, she replied. I know, he said, this isn't about that. She didn't ask what it was about. The negotiation began smoothly, too smoothly. The opposing firms smiled too easily, conceded too quickly. Iris clocked it immediately, the way they deferred, the way they let her talk without interruption. They were setting something up. When the shift came, it was subtle. A senior partner leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. Before we proceed, he said pleasantly, we should clarify Ms. Monroe's role. The room stilled. Iris kept her expression calm. My role is outlined in the agreement. Temporary, he added lightly. Advisory, correct? Ethan didn't move. Iris answered evenly, correct. The man smiled. Then perhaps we should wait until decisions are being made by permanent leadership. A ripple of murmurs moved through the room. Iris felt the heat rise, but she didn't flinch. This decision affects the restructuring timeline, she said, which I designed. And which Mr. Cross approved, the man countered. Ultimately his call. That was the trap. Force her aside, reduce her authority, reassert control. Iris opened her mouth. Ethan stood. No, he said calmly, the single word cut through the room. He stepped toward Iris, not in front of her, not behind her, but beside her. His hand settled at the small of her back, firm and unmistakable. She stiffened. This wasn't unavoidable contact. This was deliberate. She stays, Ethan said, and she speaks. The man raised an eyebrow. With respect, this is business. Ethan leaned closer to Iris then, mouth near her ear, voice low enough that only she could hear. I want you here, he whispered. I want you choosing this. I want you standing with me. Her breath caught. The world narrowed to the sound of her pulse and the warmth of his hand grounding her in place. He straightened, still holding her close. This is my decision, Ethan continued, voice steady, and if that's a problem, we're done here. Silence crashed down, no one challenged him. No one looked away from Iris, because the whisper hadn't been quiet enough, and everyone had seen the way he hadn't let go. They left immediately, the car door closed, sealing the quiet around them. What was that? Iris demanded, turning to him. The truth, he replied. That wasn't part of the plan. There is no plan anymore, her heart hammered. You pulled me into something without asking. I pulled you out of being sidelined, he said. There's a difference. You whispered, she stopped, swallowing hard. You said things you had no right to say. Ethan met her gaze, unflinching. I said what I wanted. That's not fair. No, he agreed softly. It's honest. She looked away, struggling to breathe through the storm inside her. This ends, she said. When the contract does? If that's what you want, he replied. The words were calm, too calm. They scared her more than resistance would have. Back at the office, the aftermath rippled outward. Emails, calls, rumors sharpened into certainty. People knew now. They knew Ethan Cross didn't protect lightly. They knew he didn't whisper to anyone. They knew Iris Monroe mattered. She found him in his office that night, lights low, city blinking behind him. You can't do that again, she said. I won't, he replied. You're lying. He didn't deny it. Why me? She asked quietly. Why risk everything for someone you hired? He stepped closer, stopped just short of touching her. Because you're not someone I hired, he said. You're someone I see. Her throat tightened. And that terrifies you, she said. Yes, he admitted. Good, she whispered, because it terrifies me too. Silence settled between them, the kind that changes things. That night Iris lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the whisper over and over. I want you, not need, not convenience. Want, the word had weight. And for the first time since she'd stepped into Ethan Cross's world, Iris admitted the truth she'd been running from. This wasn't just business anymore. And no matter how hard she tried, she wasn't sure she wanted it to be. The morning after the ballroom, everything looked the same. The skyline, the office, the schedule packed with meetings and deadlines, but nothing felt the same. Iris noticed it in the way conversations stopped when she entered a room, in the way people suddenly deferred to her too quickly, too carefully. In the way her inbox filled with polite requests that used to be directives, and in the way Ethan Cross didn't come near her, not once. He didn't stand beside her in meetings, didn't offer his arm in public corridors, didn't correct anyone on her behalf. He became exactly what he'd promised to be in the beginning, professional, distant, unavailable. It should have been a relief. It felt like punishment. By midweek, Iris couldn't take it anymore. She found him late, of course, alone in his office, jacket off, sleeves rolled, eyes fixed on a screen he wasn't really reading. You're avoiding me, she said. He didn't look up. I'm respecting your boundaries. I didn't ask you to disappear. You asked me not to cross lines, he replied calmly. I'm listening. She crossed her arms. You don't get to decide what listening looks like. Now he looked at her. His gaze was steady, tired, restrained in a way that made her chest ache. If I don't restrain myself, he said quietly, I'll do something I can't take back. The honesty stunned her. Like what? She asked. Like choosing you, he said, when I don't know if you'll choose me. Silence pressed in. That's not fair, she whispered. No, he agreed. It is. The contract clock kept ticking. 2 weeks left. Iris started planning her exit, not dramatically, not emotionally. She updated her resume, took calls during lunch, accepted a short-term offer that would take her out of the city. She didn't tell Ethan, he noticed anyway. "You're leaving," he said one evening as they passed in the hallway. "Yes, when? Soon," he nodded once. "I hope it's everything you want." That was it, no argument, no persuasion, no attempt to stop her. She went to her room that night and cried into a pillow she didn't own. The external pressure finally cracked the quiet. A rival firm leaked a story carefully worded, devastatingly effective. It questioned Iris's authority, implied favoritism, hinted at impropriety without making a single provable claim. The board panicked. "Distance is necessary," one director said bluntly, "for optics." Iris didn't look at Ethan, he didn't look at her. The decision landed like a verdict. That night Iris packed, not everything, just enough. She left a note on the desk in the guest room, "Thank you for the opportunity." Professional, polite, incomplete. When she wheeled her suitcase toward the door, Ethan was there. He didn't block her path. "I won't ask you to stay," he said. "I know, I won't defend myself publicly if it costs you." Her throat tightened. "Why?" "Because wanting you shouldn't damage you," he replied, "and I refuse to be the reason you lose anything you worked for." She closed her eyes. "Did any of this matter to you?" she asked. His voice dropped. "All of it." She nodded once, unable to speak. He stepped aside, she left. The fallout was immediate. The board moved quickly. The narrative shifted. Iris's name faded from the conversation. Ethan took the hit. Alone, for the first time in his career, he didn't fight the optics. He didn't control the narrative. He didn't win, he let go. Iris's new apartment was smaller, quieter, honest. She tried to tell herself it felt like freedom, it felt like loss. Every interview blurred together, every success rang hollow. She kept replaying the moment he'd whispered what he wanted and the moment he'd stepped aside to let her leave. That wasn't control. That was choice, and she'd walked away from it. The breaking moment came unexpectedly. A press conference. A single microphone, Ethan Cross alone. "I need to clarify something," he said, voice steady. "There was no impropriety, no favoritism." Questions flew. "Then why did you intervene so publicly?" "Because I wanted to," he said simply. The room stilled. "I wanted to protect someone who mattered to me," he continued. "And if that costs me credibility, so be it." Someone asked, "Was it business?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "No," he said, "it was honesty." Iris watched from her couch, heart pounding, hands shaking. He wasn't hiding anymore, he wasn't whispering. He was standing in the open without knowing if she'd ever come back. That was when the truth finally settled. He had given her exactly what she'd asked for: space, freedom, choice. And now she had to decide what to do with it. Because if she walked away again, this time it wouldn't be business. It would be goodbye. Iris didn't pack carefully this time. She grabbed her coat, her phone, her keys, left the rest behind like it didn't matter. Because suddenly none of it did. Not the new job, not the clean break, not the illusion of control she'd wrapped around herself like armor. All she could hear was Ethan's voice from the press conference, steady and unguarded. It wasn't business, it was honesty. She'd spent her whole life choosing the safe option, the reasonable one, the one that didn't risk humiliation or heartbreak, and every single time it had cost her something real. Not this time. The city was buzzing when she arrived at the building, lights on, cameras gone. Security startled to see her again. "I need to see him," she said, breathless. The guard hesitated. "Ms. Hale, please." Something in her voice must have landed because a moment later the elevator doors slid closed. The ascent felt endless. Her heart pounded harder with every floor. What if she was too late? What if he'd finally closed the door she'd walked through? The elevator chimed. She stepped out. His office door was open. The lights were dim. Ethan stood by the window, jacket off, sleeves rolled, tie loosened, like he'd been holding himself together all day and finally let go. He turned and froze. "Iris!" She didn't smile, didn't hesitate. She crossed the room and stopped inches from him. "You were right," she said, voice shaking. "About everything?" He didn't speak. "I thought choosing safety meant choosing strength," she continued. "But all I did was run from you, from what I wanted." "Iris, I left because I was afraid," she said. "Not of you, of myself, of how much I wanted to stay." His jaw tightened. "I won't ask you to come back." "I know," she said softly. "That's why I am." Silence stretched between them, charged, fragile. "You let me go," she whispered, "even when it cost you, even when it hurt." "I meant what I said," he replied. "I won't cage someone I care about." Her eyes burned. "You never caged me, you gave me the one thing no one ever has." "What?" "A choice." She took a breath that felt like jumping. "I choose you." The words landed between them, simple, terrifying, irrevocable. Ethan stared at her like he was afraid to move. "You don't owe me this," he said quietly. "I know," she replied. "That's why it matters." She stepped closer. "I don't want a contract or a role or a safe exit." Her voice softened. "I want the risk. I want the mess. I want the part where we don't know what happens next." She reached for his hand. "I want you." For a heartbeat he didn't move, then his fingers closed around hers, tight, real, grounding. "You're sure?" he asked, voice rough. She nodded, terrified. "But sure?" Something broke in him then, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough. He pulled her close, not urgently, not possessively, like he'd been waiting. His forehead rested against hers. "I've wanted you since the moment you walked into that room and didn't flinch," he said. "I just didn't think I deserved to keep you." She laughed softly through tears. "We're both terrible at that." The kiss wasn't explosive, it was steady, certain, the kind that said, "I'm here more than I want." When they finally pulled back, the world felt quieter, clearer. "We'll figure it out," Iris said. "The board, the optics, everything." "I know," he replied. Together, she smiled. "No more whispers." He brushed his thumb along her jaw. "Only when I want to remind you how much you're wanted." Weeks later, the narrative changed. Not because it was managed, but because it was honest. Iris returned not as a secret or a favor, but as an equal, her role redefined, her authority unquestioned. Ethan didn't shield her, he stood beside her. People noticed. Some disapproved, some speculated, neither of them cared. Because this time the door wasn't locked, it was open, and she stayed. One quiet evening, long after the building had emptied, Iris stood by the window again, this time with him. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Letting you go," he said. She nodded. He smiled faintly. "No. Because you came back on your own." She leaned into him. "And if I hadn't, then I would have loved you anyway," he said, from a distance, quietly. She turned to face him, eyes bright. "You don't have to anymore." He kissed her temple. "I know." Later, when the lights were low and the city hummed below, he pulled her close and whispered, not a demand, not a command, a promise. "This time," he said, "it's not business." She smiled against his chest. "It never was."